I never thought I'd be the kind of person writing one of these stories, the kind you scroll past at 2 in the morning telling yourself it's fake, that it has to be fake because if it's real then everything you thought you knew about the world is wrong. But here I am, 3 weeks after what happened, still unable to sleep without every light in my apartment blazing, still checking over my shoulder whenever I'm at my computer, still hearing that sound in my dreams, that wet rhythmic clicking. That shouldn't have been possible because it came from inside a game, from inside a world made of blocks and pixels and code doesn't breathe, code doesn't watch you, code doesn't follow you home. It started on a Thursday night in late October, which I know sounds cliché, like I'm setting up some kind of Halloween creepypasta, but that's genuinely when it happened, and maybe that's part of why it happened. Maybe there's something about that time of year when the barrier between what's real and what shouldn't be gets thin enough for things to slip through. I've been playing Minecraft since I was 12 years old, back when it was still in beta, back when Herobrine was just a joke on forums and the scariest thing in the game was a creeper sneaking up behind you, and over the years it had become my comfort game, the place I went when the real world got too heavy, when my anxiety spiked and I needed something mindless and creative to focus on, something I could control completely. I'd just gone through a brutal breakup, the kind where you question everything about yourself, where you lie awake replaying every conversation trying to figure out where it went wrong, and my therapist had suggested I engage in activities that brought me peace, so I downloaded the latest update and started a new survival world, completely vanilla, no mods, no texture packs, just me and the procedurally generated wilderness stretching out in every direction, infinite and empty and waiting to be shaped by my hands. The seed was random, just a string of numbers I didn't bother to write down, and when I spawned in I found myself in a dense spruce forest, the kind of biome that always felt a little oppressive to me, the trees too tall and too close together, blocking out the blocky sun and casting everything in perpetual shadow. The first few hours were completely normal, therapeutic even, just me chopping trees and crafting tools and digging into a hillside to make a temporary shelter before the first night fell, and when the zombies started groaning outside and the spiders started hissing, I felt that familiar mix of tension and safety, knowing they couldn't get to me, knowing I was protected by walls I'd built with my own virtual hands. That was when the first thing happened, and I need you to understand that I've been playing this game for over a decade. I know every sound effect, every ambient noise, every mob vocalization. I could identify them in my sleep, which is why what I heard made my blood run cold in a way that a video game should never be able to accomplish. I was deep in my hillside mine, maybe 40 blocks down, strip mining for iron and coal, my pickaxe wearing down and my inventory filling up, when I heard footsteps above me, not the shuffling gait of a zombie or the clicking of a spider, but footsteps, deliberate and measured, like someone walking across the stone ceiling of my tunnel, and I froze, my hand still on the mouse, my headphones pressed tight against my ears as I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. But then they stopped, directly above me, and there was a pause, a silence so complete that I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, and then 3 knocks, slow and deliberate, knock knock knock, like someone was tapping on the stone, like someone was trying to get my attention, and I actually yanked my headphones off and looked around my dark apartment because for a split second I was convinced the sound had come from my actual ceiling. When I put my headphones back on, trembling slightly, the knocking had stopped, but there was something else now, something that made me want to close the game and never open it again. There was breathing, soft and wet and rhythmic, coming from somewhere in the tunnel ahead of me, somewhere in the darkness beyond my torchlight, and I know how this sounds. I know Minecraft doesn't have breathing sounds. I know there's no mob that makes that noise. I've checked every wiki, every forum, every database of game audio files, and that sound doesn't exist. It's not in the code, it's not supposed to be possible, but I heard it as clearly as I can hear my own breathing right now as I type this, and it was getting closer. I panicked, I dug straight up despite knowing that's the cardinal sin of Minecraft, and I didn't care if I hit lava or fell into a cave or drowned in water. I just needed to get out, needed to see the sky, needed to escape whatever was down there with me, and by some miracle I broke through to the surface without dying, emerging in the middle of my spruce forest just as the sun was rising in the game, and I stood there, my character motionless, my hands shaking on the keyboard, telling myself it was nothing, a glitch, a corrupted audio file, my exhausted mind playing tricks on me. But then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There was a hole in the ground about 20 blocks away from where I'd emerged, a perfect square, 1 block wide, going straight down into the darkness, and I hadn't dug it, I hadn't been anywhere near that spot, and as I stared at my screen trying to process what I was seeing, a hand reached up out of the hole, a blocky Minecraft hand, but wrong somehow. The proportions slightly off, the texture glitching and flickering, and it gripped the edge of the hole like something was climbing out, and I closed the game so fast I nearly broke my keyboard, and I sat in my dark apartment breathing hard, knowing that whatever I'd seen was just the beginning. I didn't sleep that night after what happened in the mine. I just sat on my couch watching bad reality TV until the sun came up, and in the harsh light of morning everything seemed ridiculous, seemed like the kind of story I'd roll my eyes at if someone else told it to me, and I actually laughed at myself at how scared I'd been, at how I'd let a video game get under my skin when I was already emotionally vulnerable from the breakup, and I decided that the healthy thing to do was to face my fear, to load up the world again and prove to myself that there was nothing there, that it had all been in my head, that I was stronger than whatever trick my exhausted brain had played on me. I loaded the world and spawned exactly where I'd been standing when I closed the game, in the middle of the forest with the morning sun filtering through the pixelated leaves, and everything looked normal, peaceful even, the hole I'd seen was gone, the ground was unbroken, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, laughing nervously at my own paranoia, and I decided to put the whole thing behind me and focus on building, on creating something beautiful in this world that had momentarily scared me so badly. I found a clearing about 100 blocks from my spawn point, a perfect little meadow surrounded by the dark spruce trees, with a small pond in one corner and flowers dotting the grass, and I thought this would be where I'd build my base, a cozy cabin by the water where I could farm and fish and forget about the real world for a while, and I started gathering materials, cutting down trees at the edge of the clearing, collecting cobblestone from a nearby outcropping, humming to myself as I worked, feeling the tension slowly drain from my shoulders, feeling normal again, feeling safe. That's when I noticed the sign, and I need you to understand that I hadn't placed any signs in this world, I hadn't even crafted any signs, I didn't have the materials for them yet, but there it was, standing at the edge of my clearing, a single oak sign on a post, and when I walked up to it to read what it said, my blood turned to ice in my veins, because written on that sign, in the default Minecraft font, were two words that shouldn't have been possible: behind you. I spun my character around so fast I almost gave myself whiplash, but there was nothing there, just the empty clearing and the dark trees and the peaceful pond, nothing moving, nothing watching, nothing wrong, and I stood there for a long moment, my cursor hovering over the escape key, trying to decide if I should run again or stay and investigate, and that's when I heard it, not through my headphones this time but through my apartment, through the actual physical space around me, a knock at my front door, 3 slow deliberate knocks, exactly like the ones I'd heard in the game the night before, knock knock knock, and I felt every hair on my body stand up at once because I live alone, I don't have friends who drop by unannounced, I don't have family in this city, and it was the middle of a weekday afternoon when everyone I knew was at work. I didn't answer the door, I just sat there frozen, staring at my screen where my Minecraft character stood in the peaceful clearing, staring at the sign that said behind you, and I waited, barely breathing, listening for any sound from the hallway outside my apartment, and after what felt like an eternity but was probably only 30 seconds, I heard footsteps, slow and measured, walking away from my door, and then silence, complete and total silence, and I finally exhaled, finally moved, finally minimized the game and walked to my door on shaking legs to look through the peephole, and the hallway was empty, completely empty, but there was something on my doormat, something that made me stumble backward and nearly fall, something that proved beyond any doubt that what was happening wasn't confined to the game, wasn't just in my head, wasn't something I could escape by closing a program. It was a block, a perfect cube about 2 inches on each side, and it was made of wood, oak wood, with the exact same texture as the blocks in Minecraft, the same grain pattern, the same color, like someone had reached into the game and pulled out a tiny piece of that digital world and left it on my doorstep as a message, as a warning, as proof that the barrier had been broken and something had come through. I didn't touch it, I couldn't bring myself to pick it up, I just stared at it through my peephole for what must have been 10 minutes, waiting for it to disappear, waiting to wake up, waiting for any explanation that made sense, but it stayed there, solid and real and impossible, and eventually I backed away from the door and returned to my computer because somehow, in some twisted way, the game felt safer than my own apartment. The digital world felt more controllable than the real one that had suddenly become terrifying and strange, and I knew that whatever was happening was far from over, that whatever had found me in that digital mine was now finding its way into my real life, block by impossible block. The third thing happened that night, and this is the part I've been dreading, the part I've rewritten a dozen times trying to find the words, because what I experienced broke something in me, shattered some fundamental belief I had about the nature of reality and consciousness and what it means to be alone, and I'm not sure I'll ever be able to put it back together, not sure I'll ever feel safe in my own home again, not sure I'll ever look at a screen the same way. I played through the rest of the afternoon, building my cabin in the clearing, trying to distract myself from what had happened, trying to convince myself the block on my doormat was a prank, that someone was messing with me, that there was a rational explanation I just hadn't figured out yet, and for a few hours it almost worked, the familiar rhythm of gathering and crafting and placing blocks lulling me into something like calm, and as the sun set in the game I put the finishing touches on my little house, a bed in one corner, a crafting table and furnace against the wall, chests for storage, torches everywhere to keep the monsters at bay, and I felt a small sense of accomplishment, of normalcy, of control. But when night fell in the game, when the moon rose over my pixelated forest and the groans of zombies started echoing through the trees, I noticed something through my window, something standing at the edge of the clearing just beyond the reach of my torchlight, a figure, humanoid but wrong, its proportions stretched and distorted, its skin not the default Steve texture but something darker, something that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and it was watching me. I could feel it. Watching me even though it had no visible eyes, and when I moved my character to the left, its head tracked the movement. When I moved to the right, it followed, and I realized with dawning horror that it wasn't looking at my character, it was looking at me through the screen, through the barrier between worlds, seeing me in my dark apartment with my face lit by the monitor glow. I should have closed the game, I should have shut down my computer and left my apartment and gone somewhere public and bright and full of people, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, transfixed by those empty eyes that somehow saw everything, and as I watched, as I sat there frozen, the figure raised one long distorted arm and pointed, not at my character but at me, at the camera, at the screen, and then it started walking forward, not the jerky movement of a Minecraft mob but smooth, fluid, wrong, getting closer and closer to my cabin, and I could hear breathing again, that wet rhythmic sound from the mine, but louder now, closer, and I realized with a jolt of pure terror that it wasn't coming from my headphones anymore, it was coming from behind me, from somewhere in my dark apartment, from somewhere very, very close. I spun around in my chair so fast I nearly fell, and there was nothing there, just my empty living room and the shadows cast by my monitor, but the breathing didn't stop. If anything, it got louder, and I could feel something now, a presence, a weight, like the air itself had become thick and heavy and wrong, and when I turned back to my screen the figure was gone from the clearing, the space where it had stood was empty, and for one brief moment I felt relief, felt like maybe it was over, maybe? I'd imagined everything, and then I looked at my cabin, at the window of my little digital house, and the figure was inside, standing next to my bed, standing where my character was supposed to be sleeping, and it was looking at me again, and it raised its hand, and it waved, a slow deliberate wave, like it was saying hello, like it was saying I see you, like it was saying I'm here now and I'm never leaving. The game crashed then, just froze and closed without warning, and I sat in the sudden darkness of my apartment, the only light the dim glow of my desktop wallpaper, and I was shaking so hard my teeth were chattering, and I knew with absolute certainty that I wasn't alone, that something had come through, that the barrier between that world and this one had been broken and something had slipped through the crack, and I could feel it behind me, could feel its presence like a cold hand on the back of my neck, and I was too afraid to turn around, too afraid to look, too afraid to confirm what I already knew. I don't know how long I sat there, it could have been minutes or hours, but eventually the feeling faded, the presence withdrew, the air became breathable again, and when I finally found the courage to turn around, my apartment was empty, normal, exactly as I'd left it, but on my desk, right next to my keyboard, was another block, this one made of stone, cold to the touch, and carved into its surface was a single word that I will never forget, a word that haunts me every time I close my eyes, a word that tells me this isn't over, that whatever found me is still watching, still waiting, still here, soon.